You can have every ingredient right and still not heal. Glutamine, collagen, bone broth, probiotics, all of it. And your gut lining still isn't closing and repairing its integrity. I see this pattern all the time in practice, and when I dig into what's actually happening, it's almost never the ingredients that are the problem. It's the rhythm behind them. Your gut barrier heals in layers and in a sequence, and how consistently and sequentially your system receives support matters more than any single thing that you're taking. I'm Dr. Kenny, root cause health detective, IFM-certified functional medicine practitioner, and that's exactly what we're going to be breaking down today. Before we get into the rhythm, there's something I want to name that changes how you approach the entire conversation on leaky gut. Leaky gut, or intestinal hyperpermeability, to use the clinical term, is not a disease. It's a response. It's what happens when your gut barrier is reacting to something upstream. And those somethings can be quite vast. Chronic stress, poor sleep quality, a microbial imbalance in the gut that's been brewing for years, a medication taken regularly that no one's flagged as a gut disruptor, maybe mold exposure, a viral infection that reprogrammed your immune response and never fully resolved, a dietary pattern that's quietly feeding the wrong parts of the ecosystem, and emotional load that your nervous system never gets to put down. Any of these, or more likely combinations of them, can keep the barrier in a state of reactivity. And here's the part that most leaky gut content skips right over. When those upstream drivers are still active, the lining cannot close. Not because you chose the wrong supplement, but because the environment around it is not safe enough to heal and you're still receiving non-healing inputs. This is the piece that changes everything. The barrier itself is not broken. It is responding in real time. And until you understand what it's responding to for you, you're patching something that keeps getting reopened again and again. Thus, the frustrating cycle with many gut, joint, chronic inflammation type issues. I use an analogy in clinical practice that came up in my IFM training that tends to land pretty well and pretty hard for people who've been stuck in this cycle of recurrence. Imagine you're sitting on a chair with 10 thumbtacks on it. You notice that you're uncomfortable. Someone hands you a pain reliever. It takes the edge off. You feel a little better, but you're still sitting on 10 thumbtacks. Or let's say, to get to the root cause analogy, each one of those thumbtacks represents a different root cause, the chronic stress, the hidden gut inflammation or imbalance that we talked about above. If you only remove one of the thumbtacks, you're still sitting on 9. If you're removing 5 of them, you're still sitting on 5, and the story continues. This is what happens when we oversimplify the root cause healing conversation. It's also what happens when we layer on healing inputs onto a gut lining that's still being chronically irritated. The bone broth, the glutamine, the colostrum, they can provide some temporary relief and some structural support. But if the stress response is still chronically elevated, if sleep is fragmented or the microbial environment is dysregulated, those inputs cannot do what they're designed to do and help you heal as predictably. You have to get up off of the thumbtacks ultimately, and long enough to heal. That doesn't mean that the healing inputs don't matter altogether. They do, and we covered that in the last video as well, part 1. It means that what's happening around them, your daily rhythms, your stress load, your sleep, your nervous system state, these things shape whether those inputs can actually land where they're supposed to. When I use the word rhythm, not only as a percussionist in a past life, but I don't mean a rigid morning routine or a supplement schedule on a spreadsheet. I mean something more fundamental. Your gut barrier operates on a biological clock, your biological clock. There are actual circadian clock genes that are expressed throughout the gut and the whole gastrointestinal tract. They regulate when the barrier tightens, when it's most permeable, when mucosal repair happens, and when the immune surveillance at the gut is most active. So your gut lining is not the same at 7 a.m. as it is at 11 p.m. It's cycling. A 2023 study found that disrupting circadian rhythms caused tight junction proteins, the gatekeeping structures of the gut barrier we talked about in video 1, to drop by approximately 50%. That is not marginal, that is by half. The specific proteins affected, ZO1 and occludin, are the same ones that you're trying to support when you're taking these healing inputs and supplements. So if your sleep-wake cycle is irregular, if your eating schedule is erratic, If your body doesn't have a consistent rhythm to anchor into its repair cycles, you may be working directly against the biology that you're trying to support. This next factor tends to shift something for people, so I want to be as precise as possible about it. Most people understand stress is bad for gut health, in a general sense. Stress makes everything worse, right? But what they don't realize is that the stress response has a direct, documented chemical and measurable effect on the gut lining in real time. A 2023 review looking at psychosocial stress in healthy humans found that acute psychological stress, including something as common as an exam in college students, increased intestinal permeability by several mechanisms. One was through a mast cell dependent manner, which is a huge part of the conversation. I've got a video on that I'll link to as well. But also cortisol and a compound called corticotropin releasing hormone, or CRH. These are chemical messengers that your body releases at the brain level and the adrenal level when it senses a threat. This directly loosens the tight junctions in your gut. In plain terms, when your nervous system goes into this threat or fight or flight mode, your gut lining opens up on a spectrum, not metaphorically, physically. And if that threat signal is chronic, if your stress response is running constantly in the background, whether work or family or boundaries, that is exactly what most high-functioning people's nervous systems are doing as well. Your barrier is being loosened on a continuous loop, regardless of what you're taking to support it. This is why stress management as a whole isn't just a soft recommendation in functional medicine. It's a clinical variable that is directly and deeply considered. It determines the environment your gut barrier is trying to heal in. By the way, if you're one who likes the research, I've included a free research summary of the studies that I used in this video. It's in the pinned comment and the description below if you want to go deeper on any of these citations. Sleep is our next factor, and it's not a passive recovery for your gut. It is a very active repair window. A recent 2025 meta-analysis of 20 different studies found that sleep deprivation significantly reduces microbiome diversity and shifts the microbial ratios in ways that directly undermines the barrier integrity. Your microbial ecosystem produces an important ingredient called butyrate. It's a compound that fuels and helps to repair your gut lining cells, and it maintains that tight junction integrity. This degrades under conditions of poor or inconsistent sleep. So you can take all the prebiotic foods, you can eat all the fermented vegetables in the world, but if your sleep is fragmented, irregular, or insufficient, the bacteria that need to ferment those fibers into that barrier supporting fuel are being depleted by the same rhythm disruptions that destabilize the barrier itself. And that compounds over time and not in a good direction. So the repair window that your gut gets at night is not optional. It's the time when the cellular infrastructure of your barrier actually rebuilds itself. Cutting into that window consistently, whether through late nights or family demands, poor sleep quality, whatever it is one of the most under-recognized reasons that leaky gut stalls. And of course, that affects not only gut health, but joint health and immune function beyond. Here's the way to hold all of this together. Your nervous system sits above your gut in the regulatory hierarchy, if you will. The gut has its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system, sometimes called the second brain as well. But it takes significant cues from your autonomic nervous system above it. Specifically, that's the balance between your rest and digest or your fight or flight nervous system states. When you're chronically in this sympathetic dominance, or more of that fight or flight, which is the state that most people are honestly living under these days between television, screen time, poor sleep, high cognitive load, and we're just more available than ever before. The majority of the time, your gut slows down. Not always. Motility decreases. Digestive secretions reduce. This includes a reduction of your digestive secretions like your hydrochloric acid, your pancreatic enzymes, even your gallbladder function, and your immune tone at the gut surface also shifts. The repair processes that require a state of safety get ultimately deprioritized. This is your body doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's not technically a dysfunction, it's intelligent prioritization, but when the system perceives a threat that is constant, repair does not become the priority. Survival is. The problem is that in modern life, the threat signal does not turn off in many people's homes. There's no physical resolution. There's no rest period. The nervous system stays activated and it never gets to truly shift into that repair mode. And the gut bears a lot of the downstream cost of that indefinite activation. This is why practices that genuinely shift the nervous system state, consistent sleep, time in nature, breath work, movement that isn't punishing your body, these aren't lifestyle suggestions. These are foundational gut barrier interventions and beyond. Not because they're relaxing in and of themselves or there's some magic quick fix, but because they do change the physiologic and functional environment that your gut is trying to heal in. So I want to share a story about what this actually looks like in clinical practice, and it might sound familiar to you. When a patient comes in who has done all of the research, they've cleaned up their diet significantly, maybe they're taking a solid stack of supplements already that are pretty high quality. They've made real effort, but their gut symptoms and their chronic inflammation throughout their body keeps coming back. Or maybe they improve partially, but then plateau. When we pull the thread, what I usually find is one of a few things. Their sleep schedule perhaps is irregular, late most weeknights, trying to recover on weekends, for instance, or their stress load is high and unmanaged, not because they don't care, but because our society or maybe their workplace or family life have normalized it. Or there's an active driver that hasn't been identified yet, whether that's a low-grade inflammation coming from an out-of-balance microbiome, mold exposure, or food that they're rotating in regularly that their barrier is still reacting to. Perhaps their inputs were right, but the terrain was not ready to heal fully. And that's the distinction that separates someone who eventually heals from someone who stays stuck in the improvement and relapse cycle, perhaps for the rest of their lives. I don't say this to scare you, but because we're starting to ask very different questions here fundamentally. So what does it actually look like to support your rhythm rather than just looking at the input level? A few things matter more than most people realize. Eating within a consistent window each day can be incredibly beneficial for someone who's got a system under stress. Your gut microbiome is time sensitive. The bacterial populations themselves that support your barrier function have their own circadian rhythm as well. Eating at wildly different times every day disrupts those populations in ways that undermine that stability that your barrier depends on. Also, prioritizing sleep consistency over sleep duration even can go a long way. Going to bed and waking at consistent times, even on weekends, matters more to your gut's repair cycle than trying to make up hours on Saturday. And managing the nervous system input before adding on too many interventions is incredibly important as well. If your sympathetic nervous system is chronically activated, adding more supplements to a system that can absorb them and utilize them properly has a ceiling. Vagal tone practices, genuine recovery time, and intentional downregulation and boundary setting are upstream in many ways of supplementation, not just next to it. And identifying what's driving the permeability before assuming that the answer is more support is critical. Sometimes what's needed is not additional healing inputs. It's finding and removing what keeps reopening the barrier in the first place. That last part is exactly where advanced good functional testing comes in. A stool panel, cortisol rhythm test, inflammatory markers, and even organic acids testing can tell us what's happening at a deeper cellular and microbiome level. These aren't just data points too when they're interpreted correctly. They tell you what your gut is actually responding to, and it can change the entire approach depending on what we find. If this idea resonates with you and you're one looking for support through your healing journey, whether you're actively going through something or you're trying to optimize, and you're in one of the states that I practice in, check out the application for the Health Mystery Map call below, a chance to talk to me about your case and to see if we're a fit for working together. Just know that leaky gut is not some ingredient deficiency. It is a terrain problem foundationally. And the terrain includes everything your gut is living inside of, your stress chemistry, your sleep architecture, your microbial environment, your nervous system state, and all the upstream drivers that are still keeping the barrier in a state of reactivity. The ingredients matter. We covered that in the last video, but adding on ingredients working against an unsupportive daily environment is like trying to rebuild a house in a hurricane. Healing happens in the windows between the storms. Your job is to make those windows as long as possible, maybe more consistent and better supportive. That's the rhythm. And if you're doing everything right and still not seeing the progress that you expected, The next question isn't what else you should add. It's what is my body responding to and how do I actually figure that out? That's the investigation that the third video in the series goes into, including the 4 approaches that have the strongest clinical case for leaky gut when the basics haven't been enough. Check it out. I'm Dr. Kenny, Root Cause Health Detective. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.